Good evening and welcome. I want to thank everyone for being here with us tonight at our compelling conversation series featuring Sean Ellis. As many of you may know, if you're a BHCC student or faculty or staff member, you have been part of our program throughout the year since the beginning of last year. We've had some great people who came and presented and spoke to our students and spoke to us and shared their experiences and their artistry. And we're just so grateful tonight to continue that with Sean Ellis. And I don't know, I just feel like I'm really excited about tonight. I feel like it's like an honor, to have him here. And after watching Trial 4 and seeing everything that he's gone through, it's just really a privilege. So Sean, we really want to welcome you and thank you for your time and your presence here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And before we get started, I'd also like to express my sincere appreciation for everyone that's part of the program and helped make this possible, from our events team to our faculty members who have engaged, the HOPE initiative, the students who wrote in questions, our criminal justice department. There's so many people who collaborated together to make tonight possible. And that's our community, that's who we are. And I think that's what makes us successful and be able to put these events together. So I just want to say welcome, thank you. I don't want to hold us up. I know we have limited time. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I'm going to pass on the microphone to Latasha Sarpi. Is she?
I am here. Good evening, Bunker Hill. We are here tonight, and I have the honor and privilege of reading the bio of Mr. Sean Ellis. And so here we go. Sean K. Ellis was born July 11, 1974 in Boston, Massachusetts, to Mary Ellis and the late John Ellis. Sean and his family lived in Rosendale, Mass, and then relocated to Boston's Dorchester area of Massachusetts. Dorchester. Okay. Sean was a student at Needham Public School System, a high-performing, predominantly white school in the suburbs. He was afforded this opportunity through a voluntary school integration program ran by Metropolitan Council for Educational Opportunity, also known as METCO. Sean would later transfer to Dorchester High School, where he obtained his high school diploma in 1991. After graduating high school, Sean planned to attend an auto mechanics program, but his late cousin Tracy Brown was encouraging him to think bigger and to attend college. On October 5th, 1993, 19-year-old Sean was charged as a co-venturer in the robbery and murder of a Boston police detective. In September 1995, after the third grand jury trial, he was wrongfully convicted of these charges and spent over 20 years in prison. During his time in prison, Sean dedicated his time to earn a certification as a paralegal while proclaiming his innocence. On May 5th, 2015, Suffolk Superior Court Judge Carol Ball overturned his convictions, ruling justice was not done. On June 3rd, 2015, Sean was released from prison on a $50,000 bail as he awaited trial 4. Suffolk County prosecutor offered him a guilty plea for time served to avoid a 4th trial. Sean declined. As the wait continued, Sean frequently spoke at local forums and national conferences in San Diego, California, Memphis, Tennessee, and Atlanta, Georgia, to share his story and to inspire others. After 3 years, Suffolk County prosecutor scheduled his 4th trial for October 2018 and then rescheduled it to September 9, 2019. On December 17, 2018, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts dropped the robbery and murder charges against him. Now in his mid-40s, Sean is reclaiming his life and is a staunch advocate of criminal justice and prison reform. He has since co-founded the Exoneree Network and is involved with the NAACP, Violence in Boston, the Ministry of Justice, Massachusetts Community Action Network, and Essex County Community Organizing. Sean also serves as a trustee on the board of the New England Innocence Project. Sean's recently released Netflix docuseries, Trial 4, I know we all have watched it, and if you haven't, you need to watch it, has elevated his voice internationally as he continues to speak about his experiences with racism and injustice within the criminal justice system. A system that kept him behind bars for nearly 22 years for a crime he did not commit. I would like to pass it over to Professor Tony Clark. Thank you.
Thank you. That's clearly a tough act to follow, and I will kind of get right into it as we're pressed upon time. Like each of us on this call tonight, I'm extraordinarily privileged to be in company with Mr. Ellis and to learn and to grow, not only from his experience, but how he's reshaping the conversation both locally and nationally. I am so excited about the fact that we have a number of students from the Hope Initiative who will be leading this conversation. I'm just moderating, but they're leading it with both their voices and their questions to help us think both critically and kind of help us question where we are both today and how we see ourselves in the future. And so I'm going to pass it over to Jordan, who's going to ask the first 3 questions to Mr. Ellis, and then we'll be back. And so thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be here tonight. And I'm excited, just like each one of you, to learn and to grow from Mr. Ellis. Jordan?
Thank you, Professor Clark. With that being said, I know we're pressed on time, so I'm going to get right into it. I recently read the book Just Mercy, and that kind of gave me a bit of a deepening perspective on the wrongfully convicted. The question I have for you, Mr. Ellis, is how much of a factor did the media play in your conviction?
Yeah, I believe that the media played an important role in my conviction. And the reason why I say that is because as early as 1994, we became aware of the corruption that existed within the Boston Police Department. And it was in the media for a short time, but there was nothing really pushed. Nobody really questioned the corruption that was reported on in the media, and so as a result, the corruption that was allowed to exist was allowed to continue to exist for 22 years. And so I believe that the media, played a big role, and not so much that they didn't report, but there was no follow-up.
That makes a lot of sense. So you feel like the media was almost just on the side of the police in a sense, in terms of like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, when you look at the police department, there was a prosecutor. The media wasn't the only person that was questioning what was going on in the police department. There was a prosecutor, as you see in trial 4, that had questioned and was questioning what was going on with certain detectives involved in the case, and the pushback that was received by the prosecutor in the DA's office. They kind of got right on board because it's the people that they have to work with.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense.
Which is what put a target on the former district attorney Rachel Rollins' back. That's why she was always under a lot of attack from law enforcement, because she ran on reform, she ran on change, and so she was bringing that equity into law enforcement from the district attorney's position to the extent that she could.
Absolutely. Thank you for the explanation. My second question would be, how important is the ability to stay hopeful in what seems like such a hopeless situation at times?
Can you repeat that for me again?
Yeah.
You said how important is it?
Yeah, how important is the ability to stay hopeful in such a hopeless, yeah.
It's extremely important, because if you don't have any hope, then it's hard to move forward. And so it's really getting to the point to where you build up, like, within your core the strength and the love of oneself to, like, hold on to hope. because as you're doing time, or as I was doing time, it's like I'm seeing people die away, and I'm not reconnected with the younger generation, and so if I didn't begin to disconnect from the emotional piece and then turn that self in, then I would have kept myself opened up to suffer the emotional connections and possibly begin to lose hope.
Copy. Thank you for that again. My third question is, how much of a factor did the time frame, the 1990s, play a factor in your conviction? Because I know, like, obviously the corruption was a major factor, but obviously you were dealing with a lot of racial injustices and profiling and such like that.
The 90s, I believe that the 90s, and the fact that I was convicted in the 90s, played a big role in terms of race. Is when you look at the makeup of the police department in the 90s, it was predominantly white. You might have had a couple of Black people, at the top in positions of power, but the boots on the ground that were in the communities didn't look like the people that they were policing, and so the culture was a more brutal culture because they was able to take out their personal views and hatred on the people that they were policing. And I'm not saying that all of them were, but I've heard of numerous stories where a lot of them were.
So you feel like if you were convicted in today's climate, your trial would have gone a lot different, in sense of, like, yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't know that I can say that, because the power of the police union, that's part of why everything that happened was allowed to happen.
Right. Thank you for that, Mr. Ellis. With that being said, I'm going to pass it on to Professor Tony Clark so he could redirect the question.
Thank you, Jordan. I think you provided a number of poignant points, particularly as it relates to policing in America and providing context of the 1990s. We're going to bring in Anthony. He'll ask the next two questions. Anthony?
How you doing? Can you guys hear and see me okay?
Peace.
How you doing, Brother Sean?
That's a loaded question. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's definitely a loaded question, but for the most part, I'm doing okay.
That's good, man. My first question is, when it comes to the defund the police theory, how do you feel about that? And do you think it would work, and if it does work, what can we do to improve it?
So when I think about the defund the police theory, like, I understand the concept of it, and I can agree with and support the concept of it, right? Because when I look at organizations that's going on that exist within the community, it's they need funding, but when I look at the police department and the militarization of it, and how they're occupying at this time communities, then why are you policing this community in this particular way? And not only why are you doing it, what are those resources for? Where are they coming from, and where else can they be allocated? And so,
Now, I agree with you 1,000%. it's like basically like when you're at work and you know there's a person at your job, you know that's doing dirt. The police, they never hold their own accountable. They never chastise their own. Um, the defund the police theory is just a word to get people to think different, to calm them down. It needs to be worked on. I think it's just a political aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it's people are fearful. Some people, not all people, are fearful of the concept because some people take the position where as if you take away from the resources of the police, that will deplete their ability to do what they need to do in terms of policing. But that isn't the case. No one is saying to make the police insignificant at this point in our society, even though for some that is the greater hope, right? But it's really in the way of demilitarizing, you know, the way that the Black and brown communities are policed, and using some of the overall general monies to go into the Black and brown communities.
So with that being said, how do you feel? What do you think they should do with the money instead of defunding the police? Instead of putting it into the Black and brown communities, or if they do, what do you think how they should spend that money?
Like let me share with you my experience, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's I used to go to school in Needham, right? And I ended up transferring to Boston Public Schools, like in grade 10 or 11. The quality of education that I was receiving when I was in Needham in comparison to that of Boston Public Schools, like I had books that I can bring home that were brand new. So why isn't that sort of investment made for those in the city, in the Black and brown community? I'm saying so like when I'm speaking about it, like I'm speaking about it from a point of experience and what I witnessed. Is why do our communities look the way that they look? It isn't that we don't care about them, but there's a lack of investment in them. And when you look at the history of the police department and where it came from, and the whole slave catcher element, and when you look at the way that the Black and brown communities policed, it's like you see the inherent racism within the department. So why would you continue to pour resources and funding into that sort of institution, knowing the root of where it came from, and then you look at what it's ultimately doing to the people in those communities?
Thanks, bro. I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. We're going to bring in Mr. Reed Tostry.
Yes. First off, I just want to say, Sean, your story is the main reason why I work for the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency today.
You're muted.
We can't hear you. We can't.
Oh,
I think you're muted.
can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So the first question I have for you is regarding criminal justice reform, specifically with people of color. What areas should the system focus on? For example, holding police prosecutors accountable with for withholding information?
Yeah. So let me. I'll answer that in this way if I can. I always like to refer back to personal experience because there's a lot that encompassed my case when it comes to government, right? When I was going for my motion for new trial, the former prosecutor that once questioned the integrity and veracity of these detectives, it's she never got to the bottom of it. She asked questions and stopped questioning. That made her implicit. If it was a person that was committing a crime, right, that other person would be punished, and so that continued to go up, even to the judge. The judge was receiving motions that spoke about police corruption, that asked for an inquiry into police corruption. But instead of allowing a motion, the motion was denied. And then years later, when the federal investigation happened, there was police on a lower level that were dealt with. But what about when you start dealing with like the higher commanding staff and the breakdown within the higher commanding staff? And so it's like the people are on the bottom are the scapegoats. And not only that, but the system itself, the way that it's supposed to run it and operate, doesn't get fixed because those people that are corrupt, or as they call them, the rotten apples, they don't get taken out of the bunch. And so where they're not taken out of the bunch and they're allowed to exist within the bunch, what do? They begin to infect the other people that they're in the pasture with.
Thank you for your response for that. And the next question is regarding what groups or entities would you recommend for people of color to connect with in the community for when they're dealing with a similar situation like you had to go through to basically avoid this wrongful conviction or wrongful incarceration?
Excuse me. I would say this, that members of the community should join some organization. Any organization that is working to enhance the quality of life in the community for Black and brown people, and really all people. You know, if you help to uplift a Black person, you're helping to uplift the whole. We help to uplift the brown person, you help them to uplift the whole. Excuse me. Just and so it's the same across the board, but it's I lost my train of thought, brother. What was that question again?
Sure. So the question is regarding what groups or entities for the community would you recommend? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say anyone that's out there doing the work, join. Is a lot of times, you know, people get caught up as far as what organization doesn't get along with which organization. It's don't get caught up in that. You know, just do the work. And there's a lot of organizations that's you know trying to.
Thank you. I'm going to go forward and pass it back to Professor Tony Clark.
Yeah, so thank you. I want to actually kind of build on your last statement, Mr. Ellis, particularly around the work. Can you kind of, considering, as we mentioned, I think earlier with Jordan in the 1990s and where we're at 2022, is the urgency to do the work different or is it similar? I'm just curious to your thoughts on that with respect to the work. How do you kind of keep in mind that we're in this new age, but I feel like some things are similar. Just curious your thoughts on how we do that work. And I love what you said, particularly around doesn't matter who you're doing the work with. So I'm just curious, how do we get all those folks around the table to do the work? And just some of your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so there's a situation where I attempted to kind of mediate something, for the greater good of the whole, and unfortunately, like it didn't happen, and so that's life. Like that's going to happen. Some people just aren't at that stage or point, and it's like, all right, peace. Right. You got to meet everybody where they're at, and so from that point, the only place to go is if everybody is doing their work independently, right? And there isn't clogs in that funnel, then by default, the citizen, the community is going to benefit from the work being done. And what I mean by the work is whatever your lane is, then that's the work that needs to be done. So if the lane is feeding people, then just do your work. If your lane is reentry, then just do your work. If your lane is violence, if your lane is mental health, if your lane is housing, just do the work, and the people are gonna benefit from it.
Right.
And so it's like you gotta ask, because I believe that we are operating with peace and a genuine heart. So it's you have to look organizationally. Are there clogs in the wheel? Like, are there clogs in the funnel? Because you have to be working for the greater good of the community if you're doing the work, because you want the citizen, you want the people that make it up to benefit from it. That's what you're doing it for.
You said a word a lot. I really love community, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge you being here with us at a community college and what that represents. So how can we push as one of those levers that you spoke to as a community college to do the work as well? Like, how do we think about that more strategically?
So I'm not in the lane of education, but if I was, there would be a couple of attractions. One of them would be like Black history,
right?
And so I would be trying to think of innovative ways, right, to get that back into the community in a way that's culturally fitting. Because you might not be able to do it in a traditional institution, because a lot of the traditional institutions aren't set up really for the benefit of us. They teach you how to conform to the system itself, not how to go back and to repair, and help to build up the cultural, the moral, the ethical makeable constitution of the community.
I love that. I want to challenge you a little. I think you are. I feel like you are an educator. You're educating us, and you're challenging us. And I think when we think about, obviously, what we didn't see, right? We saw a documentary, and that's helpful. But I'm certain there's a lot we didn't see. And I want to just ask one of the questions, and one of our students who isn't here. The question is, I guess I'll paraphrase it. When you think about things that are highlighted in documentaries or news articles that bring special attention to this issue, what side of that doesn't kind of bring in the human side? news pieces, sometimes documentaries, but was there anything missing? Not necessarily from your documentary, but there's anything missing from these type of conversations of individuals like yourself who've had to endure this stuff?
When you look at conventional media, what tends to happen around issues of crime is that the person that is arrested is vilified, and they're vilified a lot of times by the way a mugshot might be taken, or the way that a photo might catch somebody, facial expression. Just for a quick moment, the person might be getting ready to sneeze it and make a real mean and scrawling facial expression, and that's the one that's projected to the public, right, as the image of this person. So now you've already started to present this person in a negative light. And then oftentimes the narrative that is spoken to the public isn't the narrative of the Commonwealth and the defense attorney. It's a narrative oftentimes that's ran with, that's reflective of what it is that the Commonwealth is saying. And so when we go back, the only fair thing to do as like a journalist is that when you see and hear about this corruption and you're reporting on this corruption and there's no follow-up, you got to report on a lack of follow-up. Because ultimately it's the people that makes the laws. The politicians that we put in place only really just represent what the will of the community is. And so if the will of the, I wouldn't even say if the will of the community, but the lawmakers reflect the will of the community. And so if the community want change, they have to elect a person into office that's going to bring about the change. And once they get into office, not just pull back from them, but at that point, it's now time to push forward. And oftentimes when we put somebody into office, we tend to pull back until the next term comes around, and then they may get reelected, or somebody with a nice bill might come in there and go on, but do the same thing. It's like, no, we have to stop pulling back and start pushing forward.
You're making me think about one of the questions that Jordan asked, your response to the question that Jordan asked, particularly around hope. And part of your response, I remember, well, I just said it, was seeing folks not understanding that you're seeing people die away, those emotional connections and of the like, and kind of how that's a void there. Can you talk a little bit about, because I hear it right now, is like how sometimes when you're dealing with aspects of law enforcement, either that be, police or, DAs, how they don't see the humanity of the individual, and how that plays a role in how they deal with folks.
Well, I really can't speak to that because I didn't experience it from that perspective.
Well, maybe ask it like this: well, in terms of from a hope perspective, when those emotional connections aren't there, and folks are maybe seeing an individual just coming in and out, how can we help individuals understand, particularly even through history, even through teaching, to understand that there's a human in that history, there's a humanity in that history when we're teaching, if it's Black history or if it's having real conversations about the prison industrial complex. Like how do we humanize that?
Man, so I'm not really how do I say this? It's me personally, man. When I was studying, and I was reading slavery books, right? Though, like there was an internal connection If it ain't, if it's in you to do this to a person, then you ain't feeling no human connection with the person. You ain't, that's like, there's something wrong with you.
Right. No,
But
as you're
it's
speaking, yeah,
when
it's
I look
beautiful.
at that, it's I had that connection, but what you saying?
No, as you're talking, we're working in one of my classes, we're looking at a narrative on incidents of the life of a slave girl by Harriet Jacobs. And I don't want to get too caught up in it, but in terms of, there's something about this idea of kind of, I don't want to say she had Stockholm syndrome, but what may come of that, right? Like that kind of that Stockholm syndrome, and like she didn't understand that. No, I said she didn't understand that idea of like, you're enslaved, and there may be good days, but you forget you're enslaved. And like there are people who are part of that process who help perpetuate it. If it even at that point legally or whatever, structurally. So when you talk about the emotion and you made that connection to slavery, and I think it needs to be said that in terms of the idea, we talked about militarization, the harsh idea of policing comes from a history where it was not, I'm not going to see you as human in the first place, right? So I thought that was a beautiful juxtaposition. So I just, if you want to add anything to that, it'd be great.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because I mean, like we speak about government, right? And the government is built on the Constitution, right? And in the 13th Amendment, and the Constitution says what? Right? That slavery is abolished, slavery or involuntary servitude is abolished, except now we start dealing with the exception clause. So I don't know if it was a blessing or a curse for me personally, but when as I'm studying the law and I'm understanding the law, I'm understanding that I'm illegally put into a position of slavery. I was illegally put into a position of slavery, to where now I'm experiencing a modern day version of it. You ask, well, was you taken outside and hung from a tree or put around a tree or put in the fire? Nah. But what is the modern day version of that? Because people are that are doing times, there are COs that ride down on them, that right up in the cell, we've been in a hole that the camera can't see. This corruption that's happening in the DOC within the God and the God's Union, like that happens. So that's the modern day version of it, if you ask me.
Right.
Because what did the slave do to get put in that position? He's living his natural, normal life. And when I say he or she,
right,
living his natural, normal life. And then so that right there kind of brings up that if Massachusetts had the death penalty, right?
Yeah,
I would have been on death row, right? And with 22 years, and there's a large likelihood that I would have been put to death, right? But at some point, the death penalty was abolished and done away with in place of life without parole. And so it's a question of, all right, well, yeah, we're not going to kill you quick, we're going to kill you slow.
Right.
Because the quality of food, the quality of the water, the quality of the healthcare, the environmental factors. So it's you're just deteriorating. So which one is more brutal? And if you don't want to deal with it from the perspective of which one is more brutal, it's which one is more inhumane.
You talked about some, I believe. Yeah, finish your thought.
And you deal with it, within a system. And this is the most important point, right? This is the most important. You deal with it within a system that, one, is not infallible, right? And then two, that is subjected to corruption. If you can't guarantee corruption, how can you, in good faith, sentence someone to, at this day and age, life without parole? Because life without parole is the modern day death penalty.
Right. Thank you for that. You mentioned some, I believe it was Jordan that talked about the 1990s. I'm curious, as you was talking, you mentioned something specifically related to just the brutal culture of the 1990s. And I'm just curious, when you talked about more boots on the ground, particularly, the police force, it was like, how do we get those boots on the ground, but get them to think, not that this is your job, but in terms of how do we as a society not just get caught up in like, all right, we have more boots on the ground that may look like you and I, but how do we challenge all of us on this call to make sure that they do right, in our operating the level of humanity? Like, how do we get folks to think about voicing, lifting up their voices to kind of, to speak in that unison? Like, we're not just going to take, a bunch of folks because they look like us and say we got to win, but pushing them as well. Just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so let me say this. Like, I don't believe that the solution is replacing white officers with
Right.
Black or brown officers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't believe that that's the solution, although it's a better solution. It's a better solution than having white officers or white law enforcement policing a community that don't look like them. Mm-hmm. Like, that's when you speak about the connection, I'll say this. There's times where when I was hanging out after school, when I was in high school, in the town of Needham, there was some times where the police found the high school kids doing wrong. They didn't arrest them. They dealt with it and told them to go on. But now when you deal with the way that the Black and brown community is police, when I came home, I didn't see seeing people giving that pass.
Mm.
It was, all right, listen, turn around and cuff up. If you were driving the car illegally and they pull you over, the way that that's dealt with in Needham and the way that that's dealt with in Dorchester, Roxbury, or Mattapan is different.
Mm-hmm.
And then the benefit is when it's happening in Needham, the person's not going on with a Corey. When in Boston, the person on with a Corey, now he's involved with the system and there's no way out.
Mm. That's heavy. I think before we go to maybe a couple other questions, but one of the things in which I was really excited about, particularly as you was beginning, and Anthony asked this question, I don't want to take credit for it, was really around the allocation. We talked about the funding, and I love that you mentioned in terms of we just can't get caught up in that rhetoric. Well, we have to be conscientious around where the allocation goes if things are moved from one place to the other. Not that we all have the answers, but I'm curious, and I think that even the folks on this call, I want to push folks on this call, if it's our president of our college or others, that I do think that community colleges should be more fostered in the community. We should be thinking about how we can do this work more, as you use your phrase, boots on the ground, but just thinking about kind of allocation of resources. What are some, to Anthony's question, what are some places we can put, where are some places we should think about allocating resources? Those could be human resources, dollars. Just curious of your thoughts on that.
So, I mean, it's you can tap into any organization and really see where the help's needed at. You know what I mean? I know that I personally deal with the New England Innocent Project, in the Exoneree Network, and in the process of building out that institution, if you will, so that it can better serve the people that it serves. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're talking about like physical or human resources, it's like that's a place to get involved with.
Can you talk a little bit?
But that isn't the only place. Like just to just get involved with any organization that's doing good work in the community.
I don't want to assume anything. Can you talk a little bit about the Innocence Project and kind of that work and the work they are doing, the work you're doing specifically? I know we're a little up for time, but I just would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So the Innocent Project, for those who don't know, just in a nutshell, does work to stop and fight wrongful convictions from happening. And that's done through a lot of different means. I don't believe that they get the support really from the community of the people that they're really doing hard work for. And it can be as simple as following them on Instagram. You follow them on Instagram, you learn about cases where the sorts of things that are happening, that happen with me are still happening. So when you look at the system, or you look at Sean, you don't look at Sean as just an isolated incident, because Sean's not an isolated incident, but one of the very few ways that you're gonna learn about the systemic problem that exists is by tapping into the organizations that is doing work to fight and educate people about the flaws of the system.
Yeah, I think I have two more questions.
Yeah, the other piece of work that's being done by the Exoneree Network is really helping to is helping people to, I don't want to say re-enter, but to reestablish themselves back out here into society. We try when people are exonerated, to give them a little pocket change so that they can get around and get cosmetics and stuff that they need to help take care of themselves. But we also provide an avenue for technology training. It can be things as one might say simple as working a cell phone. But when I first came home, I was given a cell phone and didn't know how to work it, didn't know how to turn it on, didn't know what none of the buttons were. So it's providing help for other exonerees and people who are free but fighting to kind of reestablish themselves out here without feeling as dependent on somebody else, because there's a difference with feeling with you only having one option, and you say, well, there's a dependency there, but when you can choose, when you can make a choice to say, yeah, listen, I want this training, then it's you begin to kind of reclaim the ability to make a decision for yourself in a way that didn't exist when you're behind a wall.
I have two last questions. One is in terms of, and obviously I'm not, there's a lot going on, but there is with former DA Rollins leaving, taking on a new post, which we pray and hope she does well with. there is a race, will be a current race. Outside of endorsing anyone, I'm just curious your thoughts around what are some of the characteristics that we should be looking for in a new DA.
Well, what I'll say is that the NAACP and Rasan Hall, who's now running for district attorney, I think, in Plymouth County, but he had worked on a wonderful campaign that spoke to what a difference a DA makes, and I believe I'm almost certain that I heard that there is somebody within the NAACP that is going to be continuing that work, and so the best thing that I could say to that is, to tap in to that work, what a difference a DA makes, which speaks about the extraordinary power of a district attorney.
Thank you. Before I turn it back over to Professor Sarpy, just kind of, I mean, obviously we've come to learn about you through, unfortunately, very heinous circumstances. How do you keep yourself kind of centered in this space, understanding that you're part of a national conversation and there are other things that are going on? Do you find yourself looking at other wrongdoings across the country or as well, or have you found spaces to take care of Sean as well in that?
Man, that's a loaded question, man. But if you follow me on social media, then you know that there's things that I've been dealing with, that I and my family have been dealing with, and so I haven't necessarily publicly spoken about that, and so that's kind of the space that I'm in. You know what I mean?
Thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of the students, the college, and more importantly, the Commonwealth and the nation. Hopefully everyone's watching this. I'm going to turn it back over to Professor Sarpy, and she'll give us our directive.
But
yeah,
Tony,
you got it, brother.
If I can say this, that there is work to be done still. There's definitely work to be done still, and people saying Black Lives Matters, and to say my name, that might not be on the front of the mainstream media, but that work exists still. That work is going on still, and that work needs to happen still. And I'm not away from that work. You know what I mean? That's work that remains near and dear to my heart. And so this is the second step that I've taken to kind of get back on track. And so thank you to Bunker Hill for having me.
Right. And I will say this: if there's any way, we can follow you, if you let us know in terms of is that Instagram or Twitter, and let us know. And also, I would say in terms of, not that that's a negative thing, and I speak for myself, but hopefully, I'll take the blame. I think also be conscientious to remind us to not only be on calls like this, but to do the work. I think we become, so caught up with trying to, admiring the problem, but not doing the work to upset it and to kind of do good work. So so push us. So just push us and make sure we're doing the moral work as well. We're just not cosmetically cheering on this situation, but we're pushing ourselves. And I said, I'll take. Don't blame Kevin or anyone else. That's me talking. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I definitely appreciate that. And before I go, I just want to the work can look different. If it's criminal justice, and I don't say criminal justice, if it's criminal law work, then that's going to be different from other kinds of work. But you know, it's definitely do the work. But as I saying, it could look different. It could look, you know, voting, because voting in this work translate into your ability to get on a jury. And what you bring when you do jury duty is the experience that you see, the experience that you hear, the experience of you being you, living in a community. You bring that experience to jury duty. A lot of times, you know, people don't want to miss a day of work and say, "Oh man, I'm out of here." But no, that duty right there is an important duty. And I'm not saying that you have to do it. I'm saying that that's one avenue of work is by voting, which is working. Serving on jury duty is another form of working. There's organizations that can be done. You can start having conversations about issues that make up or that go into wrongful convictions, such as misidentification, such as government misconduct, such as faulty forensics, such as coerced confession, so on and so forth. So there's many different ways that this can look.
Awesome. Thank you, and continue the good work. And I'm definitely going to follow you. I'll figure it out. I'll go on Instagram, figure that out. I look forward to learning.
It's Sean Kareem on Facebook. Is Ellis K Sean on Instagram, and from there we can figure out the other things.
Thank you, appreciate it, Professor Sarpy.
Thanks again, Mr. Ellis, for coming out and speaking with us. And I hope that the community has all heard there are things that we can do. We have some assignments, you know, as a teacher, I'm always like, yes, we're leaving with assignments. And so I think it's important for us to be mindful of that and to continue the conversation. I just want to turn it over to our Vice President, Naomi Carlisle, who's going to close us out for the night.
Thank you, Dr. Sarpy. I just want to thank everyone for tonight. Mr. Ellis, thank you so much for sharing your life with us. I know it can be difficult. I mean, it must be difficult recalling these situations. So I want to thank you for your time tonight and for enlightening us and for also giving us a reminder to stay engaged. And like, you know, there's so much more work to be done and that we can all participate in our own ways. I want to thank our Hope Ambassadors, Jordan, Anthony, Tasturi, thank you so much for your questions and your leadership tonight. Thank you for our moderator, Professor Clark, our events team, Kevin, Dennis, everyone behind the scenes. It really takes a village to get these things going, and I really appreciate it. The night doesn't have to end here. We have some post-discussion sessions that's being led by our students. So we hope that you can give us just a few more minutes of your time and join in. I believe there's a big button on the bottom right of your screen that says "Take me there." So, you know, let's not leave our students hanging. Let's get in there. Let's start talking. We learned so much tonight. We got a new experience together. I hope that we can elongate it just for a few more minutes. So what we're going to do right now is shift to those discussion sessions. And again, Mr. Ellis, thank you for your time. And for anyone who hasn't been able to watch Trial 4, please, you know, it's not too late. Still on Netflix. And this is being recorded, so you can watch this again later for more information. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.